Well, we've heard this one before. Dylan Edwards will not play this Saturday against TCU, and if they lose this week, it'll be the third loss in the Big 12 Conference, absolutely ending their chances for Arlington.
You are Locked On Kansas State, your daily podcast on the Kansas State Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Christian Rauh, and thank you so much for making Locked On Kansas State your first listen every single day. Welcome back to my everydayers. This episode is brought to you by Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail because when you make every move count, pulling off the unexpected is only the beginning. Stay tuned later for highlights in this week's Moving the Game Forward Mazda Move and Be Moved. Well, speaking about moving, we're not getting that much out of Dylan Edwards. At least we're going to see that in the snaps this coming week against TCU. He has been ruled out. We also have some important defensive names that have been ruled out. We're going to talk about that on this show. Talk about what the coordinators said on Thursday's press conference, Matt Wells and Joe Klanderman. And then I will give you my predictions for the game against TCU. 1-2 in Big 12 play. A loss against TCU would definitely just bury the Kansas State Wildcats for the rest of the season. There would be no more chances for Arlington. The only hope you would have is getting to a bowl game. You would be guaranteed having a worse season than you did the year prior. And with the exception of 2020, this is on pace to be the worst season for Chris Klieman since taking over the head coach of Kansas State. Now, you can say, well, there's a lot of things that have gone wrong for this team this year, and that's exactly why they are in this situation. And one of them you can easily put a finger on for sure is Dylan Edwards. Dylan Edwards was obviously supposed to be the running back one, the one that filled the gigantic shoes, and the shoes keep getting bigger and bigger as the weeks move on, it seems like, of DJ Giddens, who's now with the Indianapolis Colts. Of course, how many carries he had last year, how much yards he averaged on the ground, over 6.5 yards per carry. Really, you don't really put it into perspective how important he was to Kansas State's offense until now he's gone and you don't have anyone to replace him up to that type of talent level. Dylan Edwards was supposed to finish and fill that shoes. He was supposed to. And it didn't happen at all this season, with the exception of the UCF game, where he went completely off and proved that he could do it. But health has been an issue, and health is an issue yet again. Pete Nakos of On3 reported that there was a possibility that he would not go. Of course, the availability report came out early and said that he was going to be questionable. And then on Thursday night, the availability report switched to Dylan Edwards being out, and he will not be in the game on Saturday against TCU. The reason I bring Pete Nakos up is because on Thursday, he also did a report that said Kansas State running back Dylan Edwards is currently not expected to redshirt this season. His agent Reggie Blackwell tells On3 that the transfer portal speculation has been on social media this Thursday is it's not true, and he's excited, and in quotations, quote, excited to get back on the field as he works through some injuries. Now, the reason that is an actual storyline, one, it shouldn't have had them in a storyline. I think this is a bad PR move by Reggie Blackwell, by Dylan Edwards, by Chris Klieman, by the entire Kansas State football program, if I'm being completely honest, letting fan narratives and fan drama get in your way of preparing for a game against TCU, where if you don't win, your season is completely over and the chances of conference championship and really getting any type of good bowl game if you can make it past 6 wins. But the reason this is some sort of a story, or even had to be addressed, is because Dylan Edwards is right at the 4-game mark. Because of the injuries that he sustained earlier in the season and did not dress for some of the games earlier this year, he has only been a participant in 4 games so far this season. He could redshirt for the rest of the year and then decide that maybe he wants to go elsewhere. Maybe he still stays with Kansas State. You can redshirt and still stick around. But if this season continues to go down the drain, is that likely? And of course, there's a lot of fan drama happening right now. It's kind of unfortunate that we're seeing the coaching staff and the players having to address this. And that's why I say it's a PR nightmare. Because we just saw this a few months ago with the basketball team, with the Coleman Hawkins drama, with the Doug McDaniel drama, with the Buddy Rich drama. We saw all of this happen on the basketball squad, and you can't tell me that didn't impact the way that team performed on the court. It absolutely did. There was no culture. There's no buy-in. Those were the buzzwords. There was peaks and valleys, and they were too busy focused on what was going on their phone on social media about the team rather than the performance on the court. It sounds like, in the eyes of this Dylan Edwards fiasco, is the same exact thing. And if I'm completely wrong, if I'm blowing it out of proportion, let me know in the comment description below. But I do not think I am. I don't think I am, because this is a guy that Matt Wells, Chris Klieman completely revolved their offensive round heading into this season. Relied on Dylan Edwards to be the bell cow to take them to Arlington. And we know that was the absolute facts, because in Dublin, not seeing him play a single offensive snap was so impactful. Take the monsoon out of it with the weather. Iowa State found a way to be successful on the ground running. Kansas State couldn't do that. When he came back and he was healthy against UCF, he was great. He gave you that same vibes as the Rate Bowl game in bowl season last year. And other than those two games, you can't rely on him. And the talent behind him isn't as good as we expected. It is what it is. Matt Wells didn't really talk about Dylan Edwards too much, because this stuff came out after the ruling came out after his interview. But of course, you know that was probably on his mind. He focused and talked about health and flexibility challenges with the team and the roster. Some of the media members were asking him about that. You know, with people going in and out of the availabilities during the week, is it hard to really schedule and make sure they're ready to go for Saturday? Of course it is. It was kind of a softball question, but it was a good way to start it off. Wells admitted that injuries have made weekly planning, quote, really hard, since player availability often isn't clear until Saturday. Okay, great. You're not any different than any other coach in college football with this type of scenario. So I thought that was a kind of a softball question. He talked about the offensive line rotation as well during the lingering issues. JB Nelson ruled out for this game. Devin Vass got his first start of the season last week. As much as I thought he was great against UCF, according to PFF, was the worst offensive lineman on the field last week against Baylor. Who will fill the role? Will it be Devin Vass again, and can he improve? So health uncertainty has, of course, handcuffed consistency. There's no doubt about that. On the performance of the field with Dylan Edwards, we talked about the wide receivers, missing Jace Brown, Jared Bradley. In the past, Jared Bradley only played a few snaps last week, although he wasn't on the availability report this week or last week. We only saw him play just a few snaps. Having the offensive line recent performance that has actually been pretty decent compared to weeks past, you think they'd give you hope heading into TCU, but then you see some of these other injuries on the offensive and defensive side, and that hope really goes out the window. And then, of course, watching them play football, other than the game against last week against Baylor, I think they did step up and do really good. I think there's a completely different narrative if they win that football game. But overall, you got to find a way to win the game. Offense momentum, despite the loss, is there. But how much offense momentum can carry forward, of course, without Dylan Edwards, which you really didn't have last week anyway. So I'm not counting Dylan Edwards in this momentum conversation. But the offensive line issues and what type of receivers will be ready to go in this one. I think Baylor was the best offensive performance of the season. If you want to talk run and pass, if you want to put them together, Avery Johnson had a career high in passing yards. Joe Jackson, although was missing his running mate in the backfield and Dylan Edwards on his birthday, stepped up. Wasn't the way that we'd hoped that a running game would step up, only getting 60-something yards on 10 carries. Yeah, that's a pretty good average, but that's not what we were expecting when saying the running game needs to excel against the Big 12 squad. I don't think 10 yards for 60 carries or 61 or 67, I don't have the stats in front of me, whatever Joe Jackson got last week, I don't think that's enough to beat the TCU squad this week. I don't. So there's a lot of things that come into play. The offense found rhythm, sure, but the inability to convert red zone chances and time management issues in that Baylor game ultimately got them to their second Big 12 loss of the season. If any of that happens again, with the inconsistencies and the concerns and the unpredictable injuries that we won't know till Saturday, according to Matt Wells, continues to happen, then those losses will continue to define the season of Kansas State, and you'll probably get your third one in Big 12 play this Saturday in Manhattan. But the crowd will show up. We know that. The crowd showed up against UCF, although it was a 1-4 football team, 11th best attendance record in Bill Snyder Family Stadium. So I assume the fans will show up as well. Kind of message is that showing a losing football team? Well, you take that for what you will on this one. You can always say that the fans of Kansas State know how to party and know how to support their football team. You can never take that away from the culture of Kansas State. Let's talk defensive side. On the other side of this one, there's some major injuries there and how they can slow down Josh Hoover, another big, great quarterback inside the Big 12. We'll do that next right here on Locked On Kansas State. But first, it's almost the weekend, and it's time to crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash streaks, saving more every time you order, these players delivered when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For Kansas State, Avery Johnson delivered in a big way. If you want to take and only focus on that pick six, fine, but I will not do that. I think with the exception of that one play, he played the best game that he ever has in a Kansas State uniform, passing for a career high, running, scrambling in the first drive of the game. I wish we saw more of that. Who knows if we ever see that again. But I think Avery Johnson played a fantastic game, especially with the circumstances of some of his best receivers out and the missing of Dylan Edwards at full capacity. So if you've been watching week after week, you know that Avery Johnson's performance isn't a fluke, and he continues to be on a streak. Unfortunately, right now, that streak is a losing streak in the eyes of being 1-2 in Big 12 play. But just like Avery Johnson delivered for Kansas State, DoorDash delivers your Saturdays with DoorDash streaks. You save every Saturday you order, stack it up all season, and you could save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. Order this Saturday. Keep the streak alive. Fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply. Promo period through 11/18. This episode of Locked On Kansas State is also brought to you by FanDuel. The NFL season is here, and FanDuel has an offer you do not want to miss. Right now, new customers can bet just $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win. That's right. Pick a bet, put down $5, and if it hits, you'll unlock $300 in bonus bets to use across the app. Do you believe in the Kansas City Chiefs? Do you think they'll find themselves back in AFC West contention, get themselves back in the playoffs? Because right now, I have seen FanDuel has some plus odds on them to win the division over the Denver Broncos. If you think they can overcome that, perfect time to get yourself over to FanDuel. So what are you waiting for? Visit FanDuel.com to download the FanDuel app today and get started. Welcome back to Locked On Kansas State, your daily Kansas State Wildcats podcast. I'm Christian Rauh. Please hit that subscribe button as we are giving you Wildcat coverage like no one else every single day, your team every day, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. And we're talking about the game heading up to Manhattan against TCU on Saturday. The coordinators, offensive and defensive coordinators, spoke on Thursday. We got some news on social media late Thursday night about the out signal of Dylan Edwards. Sounds like a Batman signal. Yeah, we got the signal. Dylan Edwards is out again. And that was just an unfortunate news, of course. The fact that his agent spoke out saying that he's not going to redshirt, we'll see what happens if there's a loss on the schedule this week, if that ultimately changes. Because that became a story, because that became a PR narrative, I'm not giving the warm and fuzzies if Kansas State moves to 3 losses on the year. I spoke with Brian Smith this past week. I'm sure you saw it if you're an everydayer on Locked On Kansas State. I believe it was Wednesday's episode. If you want to go back and look at it, I think if this is a loss and if this season goes astray, especially if it goes to 5-7 or worse and they don't play in a bowl game, I think you're going to see a mass exodus in the transfer portal. Say what you will if you think that's a good thing or not, but it's going to be a pretty rough offseason for Kansas State if things don't shape up moving forward. But on the defensive side, let's switch over to that because I think there's still some news that needs to be discussed over on that side. Toby Asusami is going to be out as well in this one. And that means there's another big, huge hit for the defensive side and for Kansas State in general. Josh Hoover is a very good quarterback, and you just go from Sawyer Robertson to Josh Hoover. Both have really good passing techniques. Both are very good when it comes to getting it down the field quickly. They have very good wide receivers. One of them is, I think, Eric McAllister, I think his name is, catches the football insane. Got some size on the outside, 50-50 ball. It most likely is more like a 60-40 ball when you're throwing it in his direction. Very good football player. I don't know if I want to put him on like a Michael Trigg kind of status with physicality, the tight end that we saw from Baylor last week, but he's still one of those guys that can go up and get it, and Hoover puts it in a spot that usually only his receivers can get. He's done a really good job throwing the football over the last few seasons. Last year, he led the Big 12 in passing yards. I think he was just under 4,000 yards or just hit it. It was just around that range, and I think he's going to continue to do so. I mentioned on Thursday in the crossover with Darian Gray of Locked On Horned Frogs that I think that Sonny Gray is going to take this game personal. He just did that last week against Colorado after their week 1 upset right after their national championship run when Deion Sanders was making his debut at Colorado. Well, if you remember, the Big 12 game right before that was the Big 12 championship in 2022 where Kansas State defeated TCU, and still, although TCU had the last laugh, Max Duggan, things like that, found themselves in the national championship game. They did not have the chance to raise the conference championship game. They had no hardware that season. They made it to the college football playoffs, but they didn't win the national championship. They didn't win their conference championship. They had no hardware to speak of, and they can't talk about it in their trophy chase. All they can just say is, hey, look, we made it to the college football playoffs. Something that Kansas State hasn't done. Not going to take that away from them by any means whatsoever. But I think Sonny Dykes is going to take this one a little personal. I think they have a good running game. I think this offense is very good. And I think the defense is going to have some struggles in this one whatsoever. Joe Klanderman spoke on Thursday, talked about how you're playing back-to-back elite quarterbacks. You know, they keep coming, he said, referring to Big 12's deep lineups of elite quarterbacks. He praised Josh Hoover. He called them one of the savviest in the league and compared him to other top-tier Big 12 quarterbacks. I would think if you're going to power rank them based on this year's performance in the Big 12, I think Sawyer Robertson is number 1 in all of Big 12 quarterbacks so far this year. I think you can make an argument that Josh Hoover is number 2. So I think in back-to-back weeks, based on just this season's performances, you are playing the best 2 quarterbacks inside the Big 12 in Robertson and then now Josh Hoover. He thrives in TCU's system, according to Joe Klanderman, because they use what's called a 50 pro protection, which is only 5 linemen with no extra blockers, and it gives Hoover 5 receiving options and spreads the defense thin. Something that is already a problem for Kansas State with defense being thin, especially on the pass rushing side. But the secondary has still been somewhat of concern, improving every week. But this season's only 12 games strong, and you can only improve so much until you're out of bowl contention, right? I've really enjoyed what I've seen from the secondary over the last couple of weeks. Not going to lie, if everydayers know that I continue to keep talking great things about Zayshawn Rich, Quay Moss, Gunnar Maldonado, Donovan McIntosh. There's a lot of really good players inside of the secondary. They just haven't had, with the exception of the UCF game, they just haven't had that game. This could be that potential game for them. The UCF game, can you really check that off as having a good secondary game? Because UCF isn't really known for being a passing team, and they still up an 82-yard touchdown in that one. Baylor, we knew that was going to be a shootout going back and forth. Take that for what you will. I think the secondary actually did a good job with the exception of stopping Michael Trigg, but not even SEC teams could do that this year. So take that for what you will. This game against TCU, with Josh Hoover at the helm, if they can find a way to slow down TCU, make sure they don't score as many points, and keep everything in front of them, not let up big plays, take the right angles, and then make sure no explosive plays happen, then I think you can stick around. And I think that is one of the biggest ways that you win this football game if your secondary steps up. I think you have to force at least 1 or 2 turnovers on Josh Hoover, something that they happened with the Baylor offense last week. But then on the flip side, Kansas State offense has to capitalize. If the defense does their job, Kansas State will stay in this game, at least for the foreseeable 3.5 quarters. You know, we'll see if the offense and the play calling and the time management from the coaching staff, something that's been a problem for multiple games this year, can fix their own problems, because that's a different story. But speaking on the defensive side, that's what I want to see. Because of Toby's injury, and that's a huge hit, and it says that he's going to be out for more than this week. Klanderman said it's, quote, likely long-term, at least a few weeks. Not sure if it'll be the rest of the season, but said likely long-term. That's a huge blow for him. He said Jordan Allen's going to take a bigger role. Said this might help Allen finally find a home at one position, and it's going to be more pressure on Travis Bates and Cody Stufflebean, who he called, quote, great players, but now carrying heavier snap counts. That was a big concern about Chris Klieman, heading into the beginning of the season. If you remember the narrative about this defense being gassed during the first week against Iowa State, he said there was just way too many players getting way too many snaps in this one, and they had to find a way to share the love. Now we're getting deep into the season where we know injuries were going to be a concern, just like it's a concern on every other team inside the conference, inside of all of college football. And you're going back to that same type of, well, we're back at this again. You got these only a short amount of players that have to take even more snaps. What does that mean moving forward? If I'm TCU, I'm salivating because I'm looking at what happened over the past couple games where Kansas State couldn't hold up the end of the bargain and they were gassed. Iowa State, Army as two of those games. If that's the same case and you have to see more of these players get more snaps like Bates, Stufflebeans, Jordan Allen, they can't get themselves off the field because TCU is driving methodical 10-play drives, something they have done so far this season at multiple times, then that could be a huge issue for Kansas State. If the defense can't get off the field and allow Avery Johnson to get down the field and do his work, even with the issues that their offense has right now, with the missing of Dylan Edwards, we'll see who is going to be at wide receiver this week. That's just a huge issue. And I think we are going to be in the possibility of a realm to where if that happens, you're in the same boat to what happened against Army and Iowa State this coming week against TCU. So without further ado, let me give you my final predictions and some things I want to see to make sure Kansas State can get their second win in Big 12 play and avoid that disastrous third loss in conference play. Because if you get that third loss, it's absolutely over. And it's time to get that fork out of the drawer and stick it right in the Wildcat. We'll do it right here next, right here on Locked On Kansas State. This episode is brought to you by Mazda, moving the game forward. For those who believe it's not about playing the game, it's about redefining it. There are moments that do more than just put points on the board. They move crowds, move cultures, and keep moving the game forward. This week's moment that moved the game forward, I'm going with Daniel Cobbs with the interception in the end zone in the first quarter against Baylor. Loved it. If it wasn't for the Kansas State offense failing to make any type of big kind of good performance on those turnovers, it would have been a different ball game, different score if Kansas State would have been able to capitalize on those issues. But that's not because of Daniel Cobbs. He had a great game inside the secondary, and shout out to him for doing that. So when you follow what moves you, the unexpected is only the beginning. And just like there's more to every highlight, there's more to every Mazda vehicle. Mazda, move and be moved. All right, let's dive into it. Let me give you my predictions right here on Locked On Kansas State. Hit that subscribe button if you agree, if you disagree, leave a comment below. I want your score predictions as well against TCU in Manhattan on Saturday. Again, this game will be 2:30 Central Time. It's the afternoon slate after playing a couple morning slates. We'll see if that does any type of impact as well. We will have a reaction show right after the game on Saturday over here on Locked On Kansas State. So be sure to hit that bell notification if you're over on YouTube. If you're listening on audio, if you're about to go to the game, when you drive home, it'll be in your audio feeds, and you can listen to the recap as well. I don't know if Kansas State can win this football game. And although the injury concern to Dylan Edwards, of course, is huge, and it's one that just really makes you have this PTSD kind of feeling because you haven't had him all season long and you want to have him. And when you have in Big 12 play is when he goes off. I don't know if that's the huge concern for me because you found a way to stuck around with Baylor, not having him at full potential. But I don't know if the fact that now TCU knows there's no Dylan Edwards, they can game plan better. Every week so far where Kansas State has had a game where there's no Dylan Edwards, the running game has been really bad. It's been really bad. And if there's no possibility of having him in there, I think TCU can have a heyday. And Joe Jackson, I don't know if he gets as many yards as he does since last week, and that's 60 yards against Baylor. And even if he did, I don't know if that's enough. The injuries on the defensive side concern me because Toby has been fantastic. We've seen some of the other guys in the front four step up as well. But how much is it going to take until they're gassed yet again? I think the secondary has a good chance of having a really good game. Maybe it could be their statement game, and maybe that is what helps them win the football game. But Josh Hoover has done a great job at moving the football around. And finding a way to win football games. Their only loss is a field goal loss to the defending Big 12 champs, Arizona State, who they're 5-1 as well. So I think TCU wins this football game. I unfortunately think it's the last shovel of dirt on top of the Kansas State Wildcats to bury them for the rest of the season when it comes to getting to the Big 12 championship game. I think it finally just ends any doubt that this year is really over. I hate to say it, but I do think that's where I'm going. I think it's close, though. I think it's just outside of one score. I think TCU wins by 10. I'm not going to give an actual score prediction. I think TCU wins by 10, though. 9 or 10. Just over a one-possession game. That's what I'm going with right there. Let me know your thoughts on the score prediction below. That's where I'm going with on that one. I think Kansas State can score some points, but I think TCU can as well. If you want to give me a score prediction, let me go, 35-24. There are 11 points. I'll go there. 35-24 is what I'm going with for TCU against Kansas State. I don't like it. I hate that I had to say it out loud. But until the time management issues are solved, which I don't know if that happens in 1 week's time, until the run game can show that they can be something aggressive without sneaking Jace Brown in the backfield or having a healthy Dylan Edwards, I'm nervous. And until the secondary can show that there is no doubt, no concern about the missing of the secondary players you left to go last year to go to the NFL. Tripping over my words there, apologize. But like missing Jacob Parrish, missing Marcus Siegel. You had a good game against UCF, but how good can you do it against a passing offense like TCU? So that's what I'm going with right there. Let me know your thoughts in the comment description below. We'll be back here on Saturday for a reaction show. But until then, please like the video, please subscribe, and we'll see you back here next time, right here on Locked On Kansas State.